Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about how you can actually use intermittent fasting for life and really a lot of the secrets and tips on what I've learned over the past over 7 years of using intermittent fasting throughout that entire time and still seeing results and still maintaining or even improving the wellness and goals that I have, as well as the various clients and AM peeps as well. So these are tools and strategies that can help you to see the results that you're looking for, not just for like a short amount of time, but for life, and make it sustainable for your life so that you can continue to feel great and achieve your goals. So as you guys probably know, today is day one of the summer intermittent fasting challenge. This is our 6-week summer intermittent fasting challenge. It starts today. We have a brand new meal plan with brand new recipes, 50 brand new recipes, as well as a ton of information. Oh my gosh, like so much really great information, especially if you struggle with sugar cravings or sugar addiction. A lot of strategies in there and new recipes and meal plans that we're going to be using over the next 6 weeks. Ton of new recipes, like some of my favorites, especially if you guys haven't tried the bell pepper sando, you have to try that one. It's like so simple and so delicious. But anyway, if you guys want to join in on the 6-week summer intermittent fasting challenge, it starts today. It's not too late to join. You can grab the details for how to get started linked down description below. Now let's dive into, we have so much good information today, like so much. The first thing that I thought would be really important to discuss is knowing when to change your fast. Because in order to use intermittent fasting for life, you need to know when you need to adjust your intermittent fast depending on your goals. So I see a lot of people like on comments in my YouTube videos or in the Facebook group or on my Instagram posts saying like, oh, I need to do like a 22-hour fast because I've stopped seeing weight loss progress, or I need to go from a 12-hour fast to a 18-hour fast because I'm not seeing the goal or the progress that I'm looking for. That's not necessarily the case. There is a time for a longer fast. There is also definitely a time for a shorter fast, as well as possibly extended fast. But knowing when and why you would want to use each of these is really crucial for long-term success. So when to go longer? Let's go into that first, because I think most people think like, well, longer is just always better. If 12 hours is great, then 16 hours or 18 hours or 20 hours or OMAD must be the best. That's definitely not the case, as we've talked so much about on my channel in my challenges, that what you eat also matters just as much as when you're eating or the timing of those meals or how long you fast. So there's really two instances that I've seen consistently call for a slightly longer fast. And the first one is gut health. So you guys have heard me talk a lot about the migrating motor complex, or the MMC. So this is your body's way of flushing out left behind food and bacteria within your GI tract that would cause bloating or gut inflammation. This is a natural process that our body turns on only when we're not eating. It's literally the only time it'll turn on. So if you're snacking or grazing all day, then it's really easy to get that migrating motor complex stalled and just that buildup of left behind food and bacteria. Oftentimes that can even lead to things like SIBO or IBS, or just more simply bloating or even constipation. So when you would want to go longer is when you're really focused on gut health specifically, because obviously we only really get it turned on, the migrating motor complex, when we're not eating. Now, for most people, if your migrating motor complex is healthy, if it's working well, you get a complete cycle for about 3 hours and 45 minutes of fasting. From wake time to when you actually go to eat. So if you're using even a fairly shorter fast, you can still get a couple rounds of the migrating motor complex and get those benefits. But if you're somebody who has like SIBO or more severe gut health issues, oftentimes this is where the case can be made for a slightly longer fast. So using, instead of like a 12-hour fast, maybe a 16-hour fast would be a good medium, or possibly even an 18-hour fast. I don't usually recommend beyond an 18-hour fast, but for the case of gut health in severe cases, that case can be made. The other is insulin resistance. So when we're fasting, our insulin level is naturally dipping down. And when we are eating, that's when it starts to go up. So we want to have those cyclical cycles where we have lower insulin when we're fasting that turns on fat burning, or when we're not eating rather. And then we want insulin to naturally go up a bit when we are eating, because that does help to just store those nutrients. What we don't want is insulin to always be high. This is where it can fall into the trap of more insulin resistance. And so if there is insulin resistance, that's where having a slightly longer fast and just kind of kickstarting, getting getting the insulin level to naturally dip back down from not eating as frequently can also be helpful. So again, like more of a 16 or 18-hour fast for these types of situations, dependent on each person, of course. There's some reasons why you might not, but for insulin resistance, this is a case where you could slightly bump up your fast. If you're only at like maybe a 12 or 14-hour fast and you're just not seeing the benefits, that's where you could go up to like a 16 or an 18-hour fast. Now, you also need to know when to go shorter on your fast, because this is also just as important. And the times that you can just think of it broadly speaking of when you want to have a slightly shorter fast on when our nutrient needs are higher. So nutrient needs meaning like just, do we need more protein? Do we need more fuel in general for whatever purpose? So an athlete is one, or even just a casual athlete is one that's an important consideration, because athletes and even casual athletes, like if you're somebody who works out 4 to 5 times a week, if you push yourself in the gym, or if you're just getting back into exercise and you're going about 4 to 5 times per week, this is actually, I would still put you in that athlete category, because your body's going through so much transformations when you first start exercising that you actually have such a higher demand for these repair mechanisms and repair foods as well. So when someone is an athlete, they especially have higher protein needs, and protein is so satiating that it's hard to fit in all our protein needs within a smaller eating window, or in other words, when we're fasting longer. So it doesn't really make sense to have like an 18 or a 20-hour fast when you have these higher nutrient needs, because it's nearly impossible to fit in all your needs within such a small eating period. Now, I know there's probably going to be like 1 or 2 people in the comments who say that they're an athlete, it works for them. There can always be that outlier, but I do work with a lot of athletes, as well as casual athletes, as well as just college level or high school level. And they have higher nutrient needs that can be difficult to be met if you don't have that slightly wider eating window. So for athletes, or when nutrient needs are higher, this is more 16 hours is like the absolute max that I've seen, but more of a 14-hour and possibly even dropping it down to a 12-hour fast is more ideal. So obviously also, if you're pregnant, you have higher nutrient needs. You guys know I'm currently pregnant, so I'm currently having about a 13-hour fast for myself, sometimes 14-hour fast, just the way that it works out because of how I'm eating, because I'm focused more on making sure that I get all of the nutrients that my body maybe needs. So that's another case that you want to either forego or really decrease the fasting period to make sure you're getting all those nutrient needs in. And then the older adult is another one that I think is often overlooked. People think that as they age, they actually need less protein, but it's the exact opposite. We actually need more protein, more nutrients as we age to help maintain our muscle mass and maintain our bone density, so we can prevent things like osteoporosis, fractures, the things that can cause a lot of downward spiral as we age. And this even includes like 50 or older. I'm not talking about like 70, 80, even though that is also very important. I'm talking about even like 50 or older. We need to make sure that we're still extra focused on those nutrient needs. So if you're like postmenopausal or experiencing menopause right now, this is a time that you'll want to make sure that you have that slightly wider eating window, because you do have slightly higher protein needs really from here on out. So about 14 hours would be a better type of fasting length, more of that shorter length. So you can get the benefits of still having a fast, but also getting all your nutrient needs in. And then there's also the idea of extended fast. So extended fast, I rarely recommend. So if we're going to define it, really anything longer than 24 hours. So if you're going a full day without eating, that's what I consider a extended fast, because you're going at least one full day without getting all of your nutrient needs in, which means you now have to recover those nutrient needs the next day and some. So there's very, very, very rare reasons why this might be the case, and only under proper supervision of someone who's actually well-versed in extended fasts and using them for specific treatment purposes. But it's not something that I would recommend just willy-nilly using. And notice on here that I don't mention weight loss as being the one for when you go to change your fast. So if you notice that you have a weight loss plateau, that is not the time to then just go longer. And again, I know that there's going to be people in the chat or the comments, because I see this all the time of people saying like, oh, well, I did 14-hour fast, and I went all the way up to an 18-hour fast and broke through my plateau. Typically, the reason why that's happening is you're just simply eating less and you're in that state of semi-starvation. And then that's going to result in another plateau. We want to instead get the benefits of intermittent fasting while still getting the benefits of the types of foods that support being in more of a fat burning state. That combination will help to make it so that you don't have these plateaus. And you don't have to keep decreasing how much you're eating and shorten your eating window. Now doing alternate day fasting and extended fast. Just constantly shortening your fast is not a way to achieve a weight loss goal. It's a great way from a gut health perspective, possibly an insulin resistance perspective, up to a certain point, but not from a weight loss perspective, from a long-term approach. And that's the big thing we're talking about in this live stream, is how we can actually see those results for life with intermittent fasting, not just for like a quick fix. Okay, that was a really long-winded one. We're going to go into the next intermittent fasting secret, but I also just wanted to highlight Gila, which I saw her in the chat on here. She shared her story in the past. I have, she's sharing an updated blog post on my blog as well of her story, but she's a great example of how longer isn't always better when it comes to intermittent fasting. She achieved a lot of weight loss results just with a 12-hour fast. She did eventually go up to a 16-hour fast, and that was a good balance for her. But she did start off the first few months with just 12-hour fasting and adjusting her meals to focus on the proper nutrients to support her weight loss goals. And she's now over a year later, still achieving her goals, still feeling really great. Super excited for her story to come out later this week, because she's just been a really amazing inspiration for the community and a good example of how you don't just have to count calories, restrict, have a smaller window and achieve your goals. Okay. So I think we also need to talk about non-fasting days, because there's, for some people, for myself personally, like over the past 7 years, there's been maybe only a couple of days that I've not fasted at all. And it was when I was like so ill in beginning of pregnancy that I just had to like nibble on some foods here and there at like random times. But there might be a case, whether you're traveling or whatever your schedule is, that you will have a day that you're not going to be incorporating intermittent fasting. Now, note that I'm saying intermittent fasting. Again, from here on out, we're talking about intermittent fasting, not extended fast. So when I'm saying non-fasting days, this essentially means like if you normally fast for 14 hours, you're just not fasting for that 14 hours. Maybe it's probably only like 12 or 10. Most people even accidentally will still fast for about 10 hours or maybe 8 if you're snacking all day. But the important thing to note, if you're someone where you find like you just don't have the time on, or the way that your schedule works out, you have like one non-fasting day a week, or maybe there's a random like non-fasting day, and you're like concerned that this is going to totally disrupt your results. That's not the case. You don't have to stress. There is a structure that I would still recommend so you can make your transition back to your fasting days a lot easier. But you don't need to fast every day to see results. I did do a video like I think a couple years ago on this, and the studies specifically on like how often you need to fast or intermittent fast to see results. Essentially what the study found is the more days that you intermittent fast, the more benefits you see. But it's not like by not having a fast day on one day, you're erasing all the benefits. So you might not get the gut health benefits those days, but you're still able to just jump back and get those same benefits on the days that you are using intermittent fasting. Now, on non-fasting days, I would still recommend a certain structure so that you're going to feel better on those non-fasting days and still kind of get a lot of the same benefits, even if you aren't fasting. So the big thing that you guys, if you followed me even for like a couple weeks, you should probably know this by now. The big thing that I would still recommend is not snacking. Unless like, again, you were like me in very early pregnancy and you like just couldn't eat anything and you had to do little small nibbles of stuff to get through the day. That's different. Do what you have to do. But if you are just in general state of health, then not snacking is something that can really help to make it so you still get the migrating motor complex activation, which remember is that gut health activation, especially if you had the gaps between meals where if you're having like breakfast or breakfast at like 9 and then you have your lunch at like 1 or so. I'd have to do that quick math. I think that's about 4 hours, right? But yeah, so that would give you about the 3 hours and 45 minutes. So you can still get that full migrating motor complex stimulation, full gut cleaning, full just release of that gut bacteria that could be building up and the food that could be building up, even if you aren't fasting. But if you snack in between, then it shuts off that migrating motor complex and makes so you don't see those results. So we want to focus on those non-snack or non-fasting days, making sure that you're still not snacking and focusing on the meal structure. In fact, in all my meal plans, so like in the 6-week summer meal plan, which is the one that just came out, it's a limited release for this challenge. In all my intermittent fasting programs, the meal plans that are within those programs can be used even on non-fasting days. You can just essentially open up how wide your eating window is with those same types of meals, and just have a bigger gap between your meals. So you can still use those same types of meals, making sure they're focused on protein, fat, and fiber, like what we do in my programs. And then that way you're still able to not need to snack, still get a lot of the same benefits, still get the stable blood sugar level because you're focused on the meals that are supporting your goals, like the protein, fat, and fiber meals we talk all about. But still be able to bounce back really easily to your fasting days. So on non-fasting days, don't stress. Know that you can have a non-fasting day and that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you're still not snacking and that you're still focused on meal structure and the right types of foods, especially the ones we talk about in my programs, the recipes in here, the protein, fat, and fiber approach. Okay, next up. Oh, and these are just some pictures of food. So obviously these are some of the meals from my most recent 6-week summer meal plan right here. So you can see these both have the protein, fat, and fiber emphasis. We have the pesto bake that's on the left, and that has the meatballs, which has the protein aspect. We have the veggies and the pesto for the fat and the fiber. And then you guys know I'm like smoothie queen. So of course there's a smoothie as well, a new smoothie recipe, a couple new smoothie recipes, but there's one too that has all the protein, the fat, and the fiber to help support your goals. So these are still the types of meals that you can have even on non-fasting days. You'll just have a slightly longer gap between your meals, between like your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and no snacks, so that you can still achieve those benefits of gut health and stable blood sugar levels. Okay, next up, this is one I'm very passionate about because I see this being such a barrier for so many of my clients, male, female, whoever, preventing food fatigue, because we have so much stimulation all around us of so many different types of foods all around us that we could be having. There's ice cream shop down the street. There's like a Mexican restaurant where you can smell like the chips and guacamole coming out. Like there's so many different things that could be tempting us at all times, that if you're not loving the food that you're eating right now that are supporting your goals, it is going to be so easy for you to accidentally go back to old habits that don't support your goals, cause that big blood sugar spike, and make it so that having that intermittent fasting schedule becomes nearly impossible because we have these blood sugar spikes and falls, making you hungry, making you less metabolically flexible, and making so this will not be a long-term approach. So we need to make sure that we're always preventing food fatigue. And what I found is the best way to go about this is always switching up your foods. Now, it doesn't have to be like every week. I personally like to do that. I love a lot of variety. I like to make sure, at least with my dinners and my breakfasts or breakfast, that I am switching up constantly what I'm having, so that I'm never tired of what I'm eating or never bored. But you can find the cadence that works for you. So like for some people, it's they have like a 1-month cycle where they have the same type of meals every month, but it's like on a 4-week cycle where each week of the 4 weeks is different, but then they repeat that each month. So that can be a tool that you can use if that works better for you and the cadence for your life, your family. But you need to know what level of switching it up is going to help prevent that food fatigue and that boredom of your food. Also, why I always come out every summer with a new 6-week summer meal plan with a lot of new recipes. This one has over 50, because preventing that food fatigue and making sure that you are not getting tired of your food will be such a game changer for your long-term approach. You know, it's easy to eat, like, even if you're someone who thinks that you like to eat the same thing every day, which I do get a lot of clients who will say like, oh, like, don't worry about it. I just want to eat. I want it very simple. I want to eat the exact same thing every day, so I don't have to think too much about what I'm doing. 99 out of 100 times the person comes back within a couple weeks is like, Autumn, I need to have something different. I'm like, I know, the food fatigue, it's a real issue. So we need to make sure that we're always preventing that food fatigue by switching up your meals. Get inspiration with things like the new 6-week summer meal plan that's linked down description below. go on to Pinterest, and you can use the same type of meal strategy that I talk about in my programs, where you can construct pretty much any recipe that you find even online to fit your goals as well. So if you guys haven't seen, I don't remember the page right now, but it's in the 21-day intermittent fasting program that we use in all of our challenges. I have a meal structure, a meal format that you can use to help alter recipes as well. So you can make pretty much any type of meal that you love, fit your goals and what you want to eat. Okay, so next up, actually, this is something I wanted to point out because it's like a personal note for me too. You guys know I'm smoothie queen. Like, I love smoothies. It's something that I've been having for like the past 7 years at least, probably longer than that, almost every day as my first meal, whether that be like your breakfast or not. But lately, I've just been feeling like something different. So I have been still having smoothies, but I've also been really making sure to switch it up because I don't want to get so tired of smoothies that I never want to look at them again. So what I've been doing lately is having like chia pudding. So this is the summer detox chia pudding on the left from my new 6-week summer meal plan. And I've been having protein pancakes. Oh my gosh, especially protein waffles. So I've been taking my protein pancake recipes and just putting them in a waffle iron. So good. Like, the crunchiness feels like such a dessert, such a treat, but it's not. It's something that's 100% in line with my goals. So this is one of the recipes, one of the pancake recipes on the right of the screen from my new 6-week summer meal plan. So just getting some variety, even for myself, I found is so important for making sure that I'm still able to get the nutrients that supports my body's goals and what I'm looking to achieve, but still not feel tired of what I'm eating. Okay, so this is, I think, another one that we really need to address. I actually did a similar live stream on this exact topic with the amazing secrets of intermittent fasting to see results for life about 2 years ago. And when I was going through it, I realized there are a lot of things that I didn't touch on that are really important for longevity, and the emotional eating aspect is something that I think we need to address, because whether you're using intermittent fasting or not, emotional eating is something that a lot of people experience. And if we know how to address this, it makes it so that our long-term approach to our wellness goals, weight loss goals is a lot easier. Because the issue with emotional eating is that when we are feeling like that emotional state or like very stressed, which is usually where emotional eating comes from, a state of stress, we're not craving like a steak. We're not craving scrambled eggs. We're craving cookies. We're craving like sugar, ice cream. We're craving foods that are going to cause our blood sugar levels to spike and make it so that we get this roller coaster effect where we might feel good temporarily. We might get that little sugar high temporarily, but then we get that sugar crash and it increases our cravings again. And we're just in that roller coaster ride. And it makes it so it's really easy then to fall back into old habits. So even just occasional emotional eating can make it so that we end up full blown switching back to meals that are not going to support our goals and not make us feel great. So we need to know how to get ahead of this and how to address these situations when we are experiencing like the emotional eatingness. So the first thing we need to do, and I talked so much about this in my sugar detox series. I also talk a lot about this in the new 6-week summer meal plan because it is so emphasized on helping with sugar tooth, sugar addiction, helping to prevent that and all the tools and strategies around it. But one really big thing I talk about in the new 6-week meal plan that we're using starting today is addressing the physiology. So we often think that like just hunger, or the emotional eating, we really just think it's tied to our stress. We don't really associate it with being tied back to true hunger. So we need to make sure that we're addressing the physiology because it makes it so that when we are in these states of stress, we're not also hungry. And that way we can better handle these states of emotional eating. So we can make a better decision on if we are going to have a treat, at least it's not going to be something that is so destructive to our blood sugar levels and cause us to spiral out and just not feel great the next day. So we need to first and foremost address hunger. So eating our protein first, making sure we're getting adequate protein, making sure we're focused on the protein, fat, and fiber, and not cutting back on meals during the day. We still want to have the same 3-meal structure, which is what I recommend even while intermittent fasting. Still want to make sure we're getting adequate protein. So if you guys like are uncertain on how to go about addressing hunger, addressing satiety, and turning on those satiety hormones while suppressing the hunger hormones as well, make sure, if you haven't already, read through the beginning of the 6-week summer meal plan. It's not an extensive read. It's very visual as well. So a lot of great tools and strategies in here for you, but it's important to understand what actually causes hunger and how you can actually suppress it, because that way you're able to suppress the or make it easier when there are those states that you are stressed or feeling emotional and you do want sugar. You're going to come into it in a more blood sugar stable state and also not physiologically hungry too. So you're going to be able to make a better decision on the types of treat that you're going to have if you do choose to have a treat. Then that's where the last note on this emotional eating section is to opt for the best treat options. So instead of, again, having like the ice cream or having like the cookies, there's so many lower sugar options that I've discussed in my new 6-week summer meal plan. I've shared recipes in the past on my YouTube channel. I've shared them on my blog. So if you want some inspiration, check those out. I have a full, I think it's page 28. I was looking at this earlier. Yeah, I have my whole section on examples of low sugar desserts that you can check out, as well as recipes within the meal plan on desserts to use there too. So that way you can go into the state, if you first start off making sure you're not hungry, but then you can also more easily then have these lower sugar treats and have them still satisfy you and not have it be spiraled out to eating like a whole bag of Oreos. Okay, so this next one is window shifting. I've talked a lot about this in the past, but we haven't talked as much about it recently. So I wanted to bring this up because this is something that also is important for longevity or long-term use of intermittent fasting, is knowing how and when to shift your eating window. So whenever I get this question on like, Autumn, how do I address the weekends? I usually have this great schedule of like my eating window from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. But on the weekends, like don't even go out to eat until like 7 p.m. and not even done eating till like 8 p.m. What do I do on those days? How do I bounce back from that? This is where window shifting is a great tool. So you don't necessarily have to have your weekday perfectly line up with your weekends. Most people's don't, although it would be more ideal to have it be slightly more similar than like being drastically different, but we need to work with what your schedule is and what your lifestyle is for this to be a long-term approach. So if you find like you're eating about 2 hours later on the weekend, that you're sleeping in a little bit more, so you don't even have your first meal until 2 hours later, this is where we can use window shifting. So if you have that 10 a.m. start time usually for during the week, but on the weekend you sleep in and you tend to eat a little later, then you could just shift your eating window by 1 or 2 hours on those days and then shift back immediately come Monday or come whenever that day is. So it could even apply to like vacations or celebrations or whatever it might be. Like if you know you're going to be eating later, then you just want to shift your eating window a little bit later as well. So shift your start time a little later and shift your end time a little later too. So we're not focused on when the fast is necessarily, we're focused on still keeping that same eating window length and just shifting it a bit. You don't want to shorten your fast and try and like after, let's say Sunday night, let's say you had an 8 p.m. dinner or end time. And then the next day you're like, okay, well, I'm going to push my Monday morning start time because that fast isn't as long. No, instead you want to go straight back to your normal eating schedule so that you are easily able to just jump back in. If you were to just constantly try and like adjust your fasting length period, then you would always be playing catch up and eventually your eating window would now just be the same as the weekend and you wouldn't be able to have that eating window that fits your weekdays. So it's better to just have your window shift when it needs to and then immediately shift back the next day. Okay, so next we need to talk about exercise and intermittent fasting because we talk a lot in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, in my programs, in the complete intermittent fasting bundle, on how it's so important to make sure that you start slow when you are intermittent fasting and incorporating exercise. If you're someone who's like an endurance runner, or if you do a lot of significant training, it actually isn't a great idea to Sorry, my dog sneezed over in the corner. It's actually not a great idea to go straight into your normal exercise routine because your body isn't really yet metabolically flexible. Your body, when you're not fasting and you're training, is used to a certain type of fuel source, usually a carbohydrate fuel source, usually a fast burning fuel source, because you're used to eating more frequently. But when you start using intermittent fasting, that's when we start to improve metabolic flexibility, where the body can start to become better at burning fat as fuel, which is great from a weight loss perspective, great from an energy perspective, great for making sure that we can naturally suppress hunger during the fast too. But during this time, it's why we want to start off slower with exercises that naturally use fat as fuel during that time, so that we aren't messing with that metabolic flexibility transition. That being said, we do need to make sure that over time once we improve our metabolic flexibility, once we are getting more energized during the fast, that you do start to challenge yourself again with your exercises. Because this is where you can see a lot of significant improvements from a weight loss perspective for breaking through a plateau. Now, I've shared Kristen's story in the past. She was interviewed on my channel. She used the 21-day intermittent fasting program during one of my challenges, lost a lot of weight, but then she had hit a weight loss plateau and she wasn't sure what to do. From there, now that she's metabolically flexible, she was able to incorporate resistance training, which is included in the 21-day program. I have a 3-week workout program in there. And she was able to break through her plateau and lose about an additional 15 pounds. So this is where you can adjust your results, especially if your goal is weight loss, by also incorporating exercise and challenging yourself over time once you are becoming more metabolically flexible. Also, on top of that, I wanted to mention a couple other perks, because even if your goal is not weight loss, and if you've achieved your goal if it is weight loss, you've achieved your goal of weight loss, or you're just looking for general health, you still want to incorporate some level of resistance training as you become more metabolically flexible, because first of all, it boosts your metabolic rate. So it makes it so that you are more easily to maintain your weight loss goals. A lot of people who lost weight with the traditional methods of just eat more or eat less, exercise more, especially with cardio, where they're really restricting, that can result in a loss of muscle and a lowered metabolic rate, which is why they have to eat less and less and less to achieve their goals. But instead, if we can incorporate exercise properly with resistance training, with intermittent fasting, it can make it so we can actually help boost the metabolic rate instead. Also preventing bone and muscle loss. So depending where you're at in life and really what you're focused on, you might not really care about this, but this is something that everybody, regardless of your age, should care about, because bone is something that it's very hard to rebuild, and beyond a certain age can be essentially impossible. And we go back to that issue of osteoporosis and hip fractures and longevity, and making sure that you're able to be healthy in your later years, and you're not going to be crippled, and you're not going to have issues where you can't take care of yourself. So you want to make sure that you want to prevent bone loss too. And that's where resistance training paired with especially eating enough protein is so crucial. Helping to prevent muscle loss is another one for resistance training, why you want to make sure that you're incorporating that at some point once you become metabolically flexible with intermittent fasting, because we do tend to lose muscle over time at a pretty rapid rate, which can decrease our metabolic rate. Obviously, even just from an aesthetic perspective, you lose tone when you lose muscle, and you just feel less energized. You don't feel as strong. So you want to make sure that you are having that muscle that you're either maintaining or even increasing when you incorporate resistance training with intermittent fasting. And I already mentioned this, but helps to break through plateau, especially Kristen's story. If you want to check her out, if you go to, I think on my YouTube channel, you can check out the playlist Intermittent Fasting Results. And her name is Kristen. It's within that playlist. You can check out her story. It's a great example of where incorporating resistance training after becoming metabolically flexible can really help you break through a weight loss plateau. And when we're talking about exercise, I have 2 different pictures here of like examples of what people typically think, one being cardio, one being resistance training. So cardio is fantastic. It's great for heart health perspective. There's some longevity perks to it. But from a weight loss perspective, from a muscle mass perspective, and also from a bone perspective, it's not great. We want to balance these out with cardio and resistance training. So on the right was this like cardio, or was this like boxing resistance training class that I'd taken, and you can see all the weights in the background. You want to be challenging your muscles as well and getting that muscle stimulus so that you can get those benefits of the helping to prevent bone loss. That stimulus of resistance training with helping you prevent bone loss is so important. Such a great tool. Okay, now the last thing I want to make sure that we talk about here is to not neglect your hydration. Now, I have 2 different waters here just to show you like how important this hydration aspect is. Now, obviously we know that we need water. So this is just like my regular water bottle that doesn't have anything in it. It's just water. But we also need to make sure we're having electrolytes. So I like to also keep an electrolyte filled one. So I have Element in here that has my 1 packet of electrolytes. I might have a second one later. But we need both because, as you guys probably are aware at this point, especially if you've used my programs, if you watch my videos for a while, we lose a lot of water and sodium when we are fasting from that lowered insulin state. We tend to have higher sodium needs, but especially if you are using the types of meals that I share in my programs where they aren't highly processed foods. They aren't really ultra processed. They aren't going to have that huge flour level, huge sodium level from processed foods, because when we have that high insulin level and also a high sodium level within our food, or the foods that cause a high insulin level and that have a high sodium level, it really causes sodium retention. So you tend to not need as much sodium when you eat that type of diet. But when you are eating a less processed diet, when when you're using intermittent fasting, when you are having these types of strategies that naturally result in the water loss as well as sodium loss, replacing those electrolytes are even more important. We forget that sodium is needed to literally send a message from our brain to the rest of our body. We have the sodium ion channels within our nerves that literally help, not only help, they send the signal from our brain to within the nerves to the rest of our body. So sodium is actually really important for nearly every single thing within our body and what our body does. So we want to make sure we're having both water and electrolytes. Water, we also do lose a lot of when we're fasting, so we need just regular water, but you do need salt. You could use regular salt. You could use something like Element. I've talked a lot about both of those in my programs as well as on my videos. But the things that you'll want to watch out for, because this is something that people usually tend to be really good at in the beginning of their intermittent fasting journey. And then I think they kind of slack off on it later because it's easy to kind of forget about these very simple basics like water and electrolytes. You need to watch out for what the electrolyte imbalance cues are. So cues to watch out for if you're possibly in that electrolyte imbalance or dehydrated state would be like a headache or muscle ache. Low energy is a really big one, especially like that 3 p.m. low energy slump. Constipation is another big one too. So these are really big, important cues to look out for that could be signs that you need to either up your water, up your sodium, or both. Like I mentioned, I know people ask me this a lot, so I wanted to have visuals of both. I will go through like 2.5, maybe 3 of these 40 ounce waters, just because right now I do have slightly higher water needs. When I'm not pregnant, it's probably more like 2 of these. And then I'll also have 1 to possibly 2 pure electrolyte replacement waters. So this one I think is 20 ounces of water, and I put 1 full stick of Element in here. Sometimes I don't use Element, but more often than not, I'm using Element. And if I'm not using Element, it'll be a really hefty amount of salt that I'm adding straight into the water that I just shake up. So that's like what I personally do. Now, each person's electrolyte and water needs will vary greatly. If you live in a hot area, if you're athletic, if you're exercising, if you have more muscle mass, you tend to have higher water and possibly sodium needs. Now, another thing just to keep in mind, if you just have water, like a regular water, if you're refueling with just water and you're not getting electrolytes and you're following the types of meals that naturally result in electrolyte loss and you're not getting that electrolyte replacement through your foods as well, then that can result in a lot of these same cues of headache, muscle ache, low energy, and constipation. And that's because of the issue of hyponatremia. And hyponatremia just means low levels of sodium within the body. So we do need sodium as well. We need that balance. It'll be different for each person, and there's no exact specific way to monitor that unless you're doing like daily blood tests, which nobody's going to do that. nor would I advise it. But you can kind of keep track of this on your own by looking out for the cues, the common cues of dehydration, as well as an electrolyte imbalance, such as these that I just went over. Okay, now we went over so much. I think this is actually like the longest live stream before I even ever got into questions, but I think I saw some questions on here. If you guys have questions, I'm gonna go through and answer some. Just put 4 question marks before and after your questions so I can make sure to find them more easily. But if you guys are just tuning in and if you want to kickstart your summer and just feel really great, start off with really amazing foods that will support your goals, support your intermittent fasting journey, make sure you check out the 6-week summer challenge we have going on right now. It just started today. And even if like you have vacation this week or you have vacation next week, you can always start this week, take that 1 week off, and then come back. It's a 6-week long challenge, and you are more than welcome to hop in, even if you have a some type of trip scheduled. In fact, that's probably the best thing you could do, so you can jump back into feeling really great again by jumping back into the challenge. So if you guys want to grab the details for how to join the 6-week summer intermittent fasting challenge, I have it linked down in the description below. But otherwise, I'm going to get into some questions and drink some water. Okay. How does Element not break a fast? So this is where it comes down to what your goals are with intermittent fasting. Now I've talked about like true fast versus more of the what's colloquially termed as like a dirty fast, or fasting mimicking. So it just depends on what your goal is. If you are someone who's like just purely focused on the gut health goal, you want to make sure that you're sticking to the true fast. That's where it's really just water and electrolytes. Now, Element does have their flavors in there too for some. So they do have an unflavored option. If your goal was purely to make sure that you were helping from a gut health perspective, you'd want to go with the unflavored Element or just using salt. There are some flavors that I do recommend as being a good option during the fast, and others that have just slightly above the carbohydrate count where I would recommend having those during the eating window instead. I do have a blog post on specifically Element and what to look for like the different types of flavors that you can have during the fast as well as just during the eating window. So if you type into like Google, does Element break a fast? I think mine is like the first article that pops up, or you just type, does Element break a fast, Autumn Bates, and it'll pop up right away. So you can get more of those details. Okay, SM. Question. I've lost maybe 3 pounds in 2 months. Why such a slow pace? No cheating and doing a 16-hour. Without fully knowing what you're eating, I would have to assume that it's probably the meals. Also the activity. So 2 months is a good enough time for most people to get metabolically flexible where they can start to increase the intensity of their exercise with something like resistance training. So that would be a really great tool to start to incorporate. Or if you find that you are pretty sedentary throughout the day, which being sedentary really increases our insulin resistance because our muscles just aren't absorbing that excess glucose. So getting up and even walking in the beginning. I have a Fitbit. I take it off during live streams because I wave my hand so much. I accidentally end up getting like 2,000 steps during these. But having something like a Fitbit is great for this because you can just keep track of how frequently you're getting up and moving and walking, as well as like what type of how long you're walking each day. I personally like to aim for, I feel my best when I'm hitting about like 14,000, 15,000 steps, but I aim for a minimum of 12,000 steps per day. Although there's really recent research, I think I talked about a recent video on hitting at least 8,300 steps per day and seeing a lot of great benefits from that. So I would take a look at your walking, if you're already walking, your resistance training, and more importantly, what you're eating during your eating window. So if you haven't already gotten my 21-day intermittent fasting program, which is also linked down in the description below, you can also find where a lot of the AMPs are using it during the challenge right now. That would be a really great place to start for you because I go into a lot of the detail on how to structure your meals to make sure that they're supporting your weight loss goals with intermittent fasting specifically. And that's what all the recipes as well in my various programs follow that same structure. But the 21-day intermittent fasting program specifically teaches you how to structure your meals as well as provide recipes. So I would take a look at those 3 things: walking, resistance training, and what you're actually eating. with the what you're actually eating being the most important, because that's where I see a lot of people when they start intermittent fasting tend to fall off on. They might be thinking like, I'm eating clean, but don't really know what they need in order to have the goals they're looking for within their clean meals. Like you can have clean meals that technically are made from whole foods, but have none of the nutrients that your body needs in order to support your goals. Great info. Thank you. Ooh, Laura, this is such a good question. Laura said, I'm traveling through Europe for 65 days, all hotels or cruises. Any tips for me? Oh my gosh. Wow. First of all, that sounds amazing. I want to go. Yes. So when it comes to hotels and cruises, especially cruises, that actually can be a little bit easier because they tend to have like buffet style where you can make your own plate. Or you tend to, if it's like, I don't know if it's like one of those all-inclusive cruises where you can order whatever you want and it's all included. But you would still want to just basically take the same type of structure that we talk about with the protein, the fat, and the fiber, and just apply that to whatever meals they have available. Obviously, like they're not going to have it be perfect. You're not going to have the same exact maybe chia pudding or the same exact protein pancake or your smoothie or whatever it is that you're used to having. But at the very least, you can make sure that you're still having that structure. So for example, like pretty much everywhere has eggs. Then you know that with the breakfast buffet that they have at the hotel or on a cruise that you can get eggs. If they have avocado, great. And you can get your fat portion, or if they make omelets, fantastic. You can throw in some veggies for the fiber, but you can make sure that you're still following that format even at like a buffet table. Or for dinners at hotels or cruises, there's pretty much always some type of like meat or protein entree that you can get, whether that be steak, burger, fish, lobster. I don't know why lobster just came to my head. I like literally never eat lobster, but sounded fancy for a cruise. But you could always just focus your attention on whatever the protein is. Make sure you look at the protein entrees and not just like the meals that have some protein in it, but it's not the main focus. So for example, obviously pizza or pasta, those are foods that are not going to have the protein being the main emphasis. So instead you can look at the entrees, like let's say chicken piccata. Even if it comes with pasta, the chicken is the main thing that tends to be on the plate. So you can focus on the chicken and ask to sub out the pasta that's highly refined for some type of vegetable. Usually you can get like a cooked vegetable to go along with it instead. So just making those slight alterations, really familiarizing yourself with that format of the protein, fat, fiber, how much you want of each, and really emphasizing especially the protein when you're on vacation, even if it means eating a little bit more protein on those days, because that'll really help to prevent the cravings for foods that will work against your goals. Okay. Enrico, does instant coffee with no sugar break a fast? Yeah, if it's just instant coffee, then it shouldn't break a fast. If it's just like black instant coffee. Brian, keto snacks are not keto. I don't know what that was in reference to, but I would have to agree. I mean, they are technically probably still considered keto because a lot of them still are such high fat and low carb, but they're not something that I found support goals, whether your goal is weight loss or wellness, because they tend to be so highly processed, so ultra processed, and have so much of that like fake sugar, especially like erythritol, which I don't necessarily have an issue with erythritol. I know there's a lot of like drama around it right now, but that study is a little iffy. But just sugar alcohols in general tend to cause so much gut distress and bloating and gas and diarrhea for people that it's just not worth it. Plus it's snack items still, they're treat items still. And because of that, it's replacing something that is going to actually be more in line with your goals. And it's shifting you over to eating more snacks and having more of that snack behavior. Kayla, how do you feel about fasting 16/8, for example, while breastfeeding? It depends on the person. I do have quite a few clients who they chose on their own, where they wanted to still, because of their gut health issues, still have some type of fast while breastfeeding. It was usually more of like a 14-hour fast so that they could make sure that they were getting enough nutrients for supporting breastfeeding. But a lot of them actually reported back that their breast milk production increased Now, that's all very anecdotal. There's no research on this. So you're going to have to just see how your body responds if you do choose to use intermittent fasting while breastfeeding. Now, I will say I personally, once after pregnancy, will be switching back into a little bit more of my normal schedule and just making sure I'm eating in, packing in all the nutrients that my body needs within that eating window and widening it if needed. So remember in the beginning of this live stream, we talked about that being one category where it might be the case where you would want to widen your eating window and shorten your fast. So if you find with like a 16-hour fast that you can't fit all the nutrients you need within your eating window to support breastfeeding, then you can drop down to 14 or 12 and still balance out those benefits of intermittent fasting while breastfeeding. Now, again, totally individual basis. Some people just won't do well with intermittent fasting while breastfeeding because they are so hungry. So it's really going to be dependent on each person. Okay, do I have to use Celtic sea salt? It's so expensive. Can you use a different kind of salt? If you use a different type of salt, I would still just recommend a high quality salt. The only two salts I use are Celtic sea salt and Redmond's real salt. You just don't want a lot of these junkier, more ultra processed salts. You want salts that also have the trace minerals in there. So those are the ones that I always recommend. Liza, how much fat should intake be in a day? Like how much fat should you eat in a day? And should it be spread throughout meals? Yes. Yes to the second one. Because remember, we talked about the importance of protein, fat, and fiber with each meal. Now, the amount of fat each person will need will be dependent on each person. So when we are intermittent fasting, our body is naturally using fat as fuel. We're pulling from our own internal fat stores. So for example, if you have a weight loss goal, if you have like 50 pounds that you're looking to achieve, then you have more body fat your body can be pulling from. So you don't need to be eating quite as much from your meals because you won't be as hungry. So protein is the one that really should always stay the same. Fat will vary depending on your hunger levels and where you're at in your journey. I will have to bring it up one time and do like a video on this, but there's a really great chart showing like, a study showing like when people are burning fat as fuel, when they had more weight to lose, how they just naturally didn't want to eat as much fat. Their fat intake was a little bit lower, not low fat, but it was a little bit lower because their bodies were pulling from internal fat stores. So the fat exogenously, or what you're eating, that level was not needed as high. But then as they get closer to their weight loss goals, the fat level starts to increase because they start to get more hungry because there's less fat to be pulling from, internally at least. So that's where it's going to change over time, which is why it's so important. Again, this whole theme of this whole live stream is looking at intermittent fasting from a long-term approach, making sure you know how to change things over time as needed. Your fat intake will probably change over time too. So knowing the format of how to eat your meals. So again, check out the 21-day intermittent fasting program. Join the 6-week summer challenge if you haven't already with the link down description below. So much information, so many meals to help you along your journey and that have this format so you can see how you should be incorporating them. And also how you can slightly decrease or increase depending on where you're at in your journey too. So these are all things that you'll just want to keep like in your back pocket as tools to know for the future. Okay, Meredith, why is a 3-meal structure during the eating window better than a 2-meal, just controlling hunger or something more? It's not about hunger. It's actually more the opposite. It's that you tend to get too full with the 2-meal structure. Most people do. Now, there's always going to be some people who say that they do better with the 2-meal structure. And I do have some clients where they start off with the 2-meal structure and then they're like, hey, this isn't working. Well, this is just too much food between these 2 meals. I need to like break this up and we do more of like a 2 meal plus like a mini meal, like a smaller lunch option. So it's not like 3 big meals, but still eating 3 times. Just one of those meals is smaller. So it can definitely vary depending on like what your body prefers. But I found that the 3-meal structure works best for most people because you can more evenly split up your protein needs. It's so hard to convey how satiating protein is, how full it makes you, not in an uncomfortable way, but where you just don't want to eat when you eat enough protein for your body's needs. So For example, I need about 100 grams of protein today. That's about 35 grams ish, 33 ish grams of protein at each meal. These are from complete sources. So if this idea of protein, complete sources, eating enough for your body's needs is new to you, I have a lot of resources on this. I have a lot of videos on protein. Make sure you check those out. But this is really the limiting factor for why I recommend a 3 meal versus a 2 meal, because you're able to, instead of having to do 33 meal, or instead of having to do like 50 grams of protein at each of your 2 meals, which is a lot of protein to be eating at one sitting for a lot of people, I can have 33 grams at each meal. Now, again, if you feel good with 50 grams at each meal and you want to do 2 meal, great. Especially if there's a gut health goal and you're looking at having the shorter eating window, so you can have a longer fast, great. But most people, from my experience, do better with a 3 meal structure when trying to fit in all their protein. Okay, Allison. Hi, Autumn. I did intermittent fasting 5 years, just stopped and gained 10 pounds. I tried your techniques 4 months and didn't lose an ounce. I switched to counting calories, still the same. I'm 57, postmenopausal, and can't build muscle, etc. Yeah. So I'm not sure. Well, first of all, you said you did intermittent fasting for 5 years, and when you stopped, you gained 10 pounds. The big sign to me that you were addressing the right types of foods for your body's needs within that time period, because as soon as you stopped, you are now essentially just eating more, which is what a lot of people do when they stop intermittent fasting if they're not using it the right way, because they're now eating during a wider period of time. And that will result, of course, in weight gain, because it's that typical just calorie restricted protocol. And the fact that you weren't seeing the results when you switched to calorie counting, again, makes me think that there's some metabolic issues where your metabolism could have been slightly damaged from 5 years of just not eating enough for your body's needs. Is pretty common. And especially, you said you're postmenopausal, insulin resistance goes up during that time. So this is where we go back to, I think it was the first slide where we talked about the fasting length, which fasting length is more ideal. Now, you said you use my techniques. I know some people will just go off videos, which is great. And that's a lot of information on there. But if you haven't also used my programs before, and especially if you're not seeing results, I would really recommend that, because it can be hard to piecemeal together information and make it actually structured in a way that can help to support your goals. So if you have applied some of the information from my videos, but you haven't seen the results, then you will definitely want to make sure you actually get the programs and read through everything where it's more structured, so you can actually get the most benefit out of helping with breaking through that plateau. Now, you mentioned also, because the meal, first of all, actually, before I go back to the other thing I was going to switch to, because the meals are that important, and the fact that you did intermittent fasting for 5 years and then you gained 10 pounds after stopping it, that is a huge, huge red flag to me that your meals were not properly addressed, and that your body needs to help rebuild its metabolic rate, help get back in a state of fat burning, and help increase the metabolic rate throughout that process. I've shared a video in the past as well on this, on how to increase your metabolic rate. I think it was like last month. So you could always check that out. But since you have tried this in the past, I would really recommend getting more of that step-by-step approach with some of my intermittent fasting programs. The 21-day intermittent fasting program would be a really great place to start for you, so that you can actually read through how to properly do this, how to properly get your meals lined up, so that it can help to support those goals too. Now, you mentioned can't build muscle. You can still build muscle. You can still increase muscle mass even post-menopause. It can be more difficult, but you still can build muscle. It's just you need to eat enough protein, and you do need to actually resistance train. Now, probably what's happening, we talked about this earlier in this live stream, could also partly be why you're not seeing results with intermittent fasting or with some of the strategies I talked about. You could just simply not be eating enough protein for your body's needs. And that is so common. Again, about 99 out of 100 people that I meet with or that I talk to aren't even hitting a fraction of the amount of protein from high quality sources they need. And especially post-menopause, your needs go up even higher, because the rate of muscle loss is higher too. The rate of bone loss is higher. So you need even more protein to see those same benefits. So addressing your food, taking a look at the programs, and then also making sure you're properly adding in resistance training so you can see those benefits of the boosted metabolic rate from resistance training. All of those are things you'll want to focus on, but it does sound like you might want more of that step-by-step approach. So I'd really, really recommend checking out the 21-day intermittent fasting program. Dives into all that in so much more detail. Okay, Kim, I'm used to following macros. When intermittent fasting, how do I know I'm not eating too much? So I'm really not a big fan of just tracking in general when it comes to calories or even macros. The only thing that I recommend tracking is protein. And that's even loosely, just to get an idea of how much you need. Because if you aren't sure if you're eating too much, then you are really detached from your satiety cues, from the natural hunger hormones, the natural satiety hormones. You're also probably actually not truly eating the right types of nutrients and amounts of nutrients for your body's needs if you are that disconnected where you aren't sure. So first things first, just addressing the protein. I would recommend checking out, since you are used to tracking macros, I would check out my calculation for calculating protein. So you can first just assess that and evenly split that up into those 3 meals to make sure that you're addressing the hunger level. That is your main tool for addressing hunger and making sure that you're not, quote, overeating. If you find that you are still hungry, it's likely because you didn't eat enough protein. So I would go back to the basics of going and taking a look at your protein level and making sure that you're actually eating enough. And then you can still use those strategies of adjusting the fat intake, like I talked about earlier, or from the programs where I talk about how you can adjust the fat level as well. But making sure that you're starting off with your protein first. And I have a video, if you go onto YouTube and you just type how to calculate protein, I think that if you just type that exact phrase in, then I believe my video is the first one that pops up. If you find that you are like more hungry, just as a side note, it'll make sense when you watch the video, I would go with the 1.6 number, not the 1.2 or 1.4. Let me see if I understand this question. So what do you think about doing intermittent fasting and taking one full day off of eating? I understand this is a game changer and at first hard, but my friends are huge proponents of the schedule. I think you're saying like alternate day fasting, if I understand the question, or maybe like doing 16-8 on one day and then not eating at all the next. Here's why I don't ever recommend that, unless maybe for very specific therapeutic purposes where you're working with someone who specifically does this for specific treatments on a specific disease or condition. I never recommend this because you are going one full day without your full nutrient needs. And already, Consuela, people are under eating on protein. And I know I'm like such a broken record when it comes to this, but it's because it just is an issue across the board. And that's what's going to decrease your metabolic rate and result in issues like one question earlier about how, you can result in weight gain after you stop intermittent fasting. Usually it's from not eating enough the right types of foods, especially protein. So I never recommend this because you're going one full day without eating any protein. And already with intermittent fasting, it can be difficult to get all your protein needs in. So this can really damage the metabolic rate long-term because that can result in muscle loss. It can result in decreased metabolism, bone loss. It's not something I would recommend at all. Okay. Joyce. Hi, Autumn. I started intermittent fasting 15-9 2 weeks ago and dropped carbs to very little. I'm now having trouble sleeping. I dream all night long and wake up feeling exhausted. Is this normal? Any advice? Yeah. So this change, you said 2 weeks ago. Okay. Yeah. So for some people, changes in sleep pattern can happen just because when you start intermittent fasting, your circadian rhythm can change a little. Now, I'm not sure on the timing of your meals. Some, like if your last meal is like right before bed, for example, or if your last meal is like 3 hours before bed. But one way to help kind of mitigate this is to have your eating schedule be a little bit earlier in the day. That helps to result in, or it's been found actually in research to help result in a more balanced cortisol level. So make it so you get the high cortisol level in the morning, which is what you want, so you feel energized, and then the lower level in the evening, so you get that good high quality deep sleep. So that is one thing that I would take a look at, the timing of your fast, which usually like you want, I would say about 2 to 3 hours minimum from your last meal to when you actually go to bed. But you also mentioned dropping carbs down to very little. I don't know what that means for you. Like if that means like you're having 50 grams of carbs, 10 grams of carbs, 100 grams of carbs, it can really vary for each person. Carbs do help to tend to naturally boost melatonin production. So by dropping it down to very little, this could, especially if you went from pretty high carb intake to pretty low carb intake, that can cause a pretty drastic shift for your body where maybe it needs some time to adjust. But dropping, I don't, I generally do eat lower carbohydrate, not like keto, but lower carbohydrate in general. And I have found that tool to be useful for quite a bit of people. However, there's a case also for incorporating some starchier carbohydrates when it comes to sleep and exercise and making sure that you're getting recovered from your exercise. So I would take a look at my video on the glycemic load. I did a blog post on, just go on my blog, autumnelnutrition.com. So autumn, nutrition.com. Head over to the blog section and type in the search bar glycemic load. Check out that article on the types of lower glycemic load and maybe medium glycemic load foods to incorporate instead, because you don't necessarily need to have super, super low carb to see weight loss benefits or wellness benefits. You could incorporate some of these more medium glycemic carbohydrates that are still going to help stabilize blood sugar level, but aren't going to maybe cause some of those sleep issues. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple more questions because I definitely need more water. Demetrius, how do you feel about metabolic flexibility? That's the name of the game. You want to make sure that you are metabolically flexible, because what this essentially means, it's like a big word for just saying your body knows how to burn fat and it also knows how to burn carbs. If we are stuck in the state of only knowing how to burn carbs, then we're going to get this unstable blood sugar level where you need to eat every couple of hours. You get hangry. Your body can't efficiently tap into fat burning as a fuel source. It's not a great place to be from even just how you feel, energy perspective, results in energy crashes, mood changes, but also from a wellness perspective as well. So we do want to make sure we're able to burn both. We don't want to just be stuck in fat and just be stuck in carbs. We want to be able to switch to carbs when we need to. Like if you're doing a high burst intensity exercise, your body uses purely carbohydrate or essentially purely carbohydrate for that, like a sprint or a burst of energy, or like you're suddenly doing a heavy like deadlift, like that 1 second burst is where you need a little bit more of the carbohydrates. But generally speaking, for the rest of our day, we want to be able to more efficiently use fat as fuel because it's slow burn. It provides more constant energy, makes it so we don't get these energy crashes, makes it so we aren't reliant on our blood sugar level for energy, but instead that can stay stable and we can pull fat as a fuel source instead. So we do want to be able to burn both. Oh, Laura, yeah, many thanks. Great tips. I'll definitely be missing my A in smoothies, but you've given me tools to succeed. I know the smoothies can be one that's, especially when you're used to having them, hard to give up for even a trip. That's fun. Ooh, an exclusive video for freezer meal prep would be so helpful. Yeah, that's a good idea. I have some other ideas in terms of like prep and recipe videos I want to do in the future. So if you guys ever have like requests for that, just let me know and I'll make sure to do some of those. Mary, I don't ignore questions about how much fats to consume. I actually think I went into that quite in a bit of detail. It's just there's not a specific number. So there's not like an exact number of fats that you should be eating or that I can tell everybody to eat, because that would just be a lie. It's a sliding scale on what your goals are and where you're at within your wellness journey. So as I mentioned, I think this was about, 20 minutes ago that I talked about the fat portion. Maybe it was like 15 minutes ago. The amount of fat you need will depend on how much weight you have to lose or your activity level or etc. So there's a lot of factors. I go into it a lot more, obviously, in my programs as well. But also to just simply say like you need 100 grams of fat, or you need to have like 40% of your intake, 60%, 70% of your intake come from fat. That just wouldn't really be accurate, because each person's intake and the amount they need will vary greatly. So me just giving a number, that'd be a lie. And I don't want to lie to my community. Okay. Lori, should people who have high blood pressure in their family history use products like Element? Family history is one thing, personal history is another. So if you had the higher blood pressure, and especially if you're salt sensitive, then you probably don't need any excess salt. So it comes down to the fact that high blood pressure is often associated with high insulin level or insulin resistance. So you want to first address that, make sure that the insulin level comes down, because when we do that, it tells the kidneys to release that excess water and sodium. If you don't have high blood pressure, then there shouldn't be an issue. Just making sure that you're not also eating highly ultra processed foods that cause your body to get that big insulin spike and tell your kidneys to hold on to excess sodium. So that's one thing that you'll just want to watch out for. And I wouldn't recommend opting for the ultra processed foods anyway. But if you're eating ultra processed foods, there really isn't a need to be eating more sodium, because there is so much sodium in poor quality sodium in those ultra processed foods, and you're getting the double whammy effect of insulin spiking so high that it's causing the kidneys to hold on to that water and sodium, which then causes the blood pressure, or can cause the blood pressure to go up. So it's dependent. If you personally aren't, then you don't have, or seemingly don't have, this issue, but your family members probably wouldn't do well with having something like Element. George, what are your thoughts on water sweeteners like stevia? I use one that rhymes with purr and find it easier to get in 100 ounces of water a day. Yeah, I mean, like Element does use stevia. So I obviously have some stevia in 1 to 2 of my waters per day, but I make sure to also just have pure water as well. So I talked about how I have 2 to 3 of these 40-ounce waters throughout the day, where it's just regular water, and then about 20 to 40 ounces that has the Element in there. So I personally do use some waters that have something like stevia in it, but I wouldn't recommend having all of your waters have stevia, because then it can just shift your body into just wanting that sweet taste and that sweet flavor. And that can shift your cravings for sweet food overall as well. Make it so that you're more likely to want things like some type of sugar sweetened treat later in the day. So I would just recommend alternating, making sure that you have some that have the like stevia in it, and you can use that, and then others that's just pure regular water. Okay, there's so many questions and I want to get through them all, but we've been going for a while, so I'm going to try and answer like maybe one more question. Let me see if I can find a good one. And by the way, if you guys are just tuning in, today is day 1 of the summer intermittent fasting challenge, 6-week-long challenge. We're starting today. We're using the new 6-week summer meal plan limited release program that just came out, and it's only available during the summer challenge, and then it's gone. 50 brand new recipes, so you definitely don't want to miss out on this, especially for preventing food fatigue. But yeah, all the details for how to join, if you guys want to join the challenge, if you want to grab the new meal plan, are linked down in the description below. There's so many good questions. Oh my gosh. Let's go back to this one, because this is something we talked quite a bit about today, and I think it's a good one to discuss. How do we know that we're metabolically flexible? So it's really knowing that you're burning fat as fuel. And the way that you can do that is to check your, you can check your ketone levels during a fasted state. That's one of the easiest ways, where you can just do that at home. If you're more data driven, if you're analytic and you like to see those numbers, then that is one tool that can be useful. I don't have it right here in front of me, but the Keto Mojo like monitor is what I recommend. I think the monitor itself is like $40, and the strips are pretty inexpensive too. So especially if you're new in your journey, then that could be a really good tool to help see if your body is burning fat as fuel during the fasted state. You want, when it comes to metabolic flexibility, you want to essentially see that you're burning fat when you're supposed to be burning fat, and not burning fat when you're not supposed to be burning fat. So a good rule of thumb is, if you're in a fasted state, especially toward the end of your intermittent fast, so like right before you go to break your fast, that's when your ketone levels, or basically a byproduct of fat breakdown, should be highest. And if it's not, then that means that likely your body is still burning carbs during that fasted state. And then during the eating window, unless you're eating just like a pure 100% very high fat keto diet, you should have lower levels of ketones during your eating window. And that's normal. That's fine. That's what you want to see, so that you can see your body is easily able to shift back and forth between those fuel sources. So if you are someone that likes kind of that data to be able to get an idea, not just like getting a sense, the feeling of that you're metabolically flexible, but also to see the actual data and results, that would be a great tool. But from just a how you should feel perspective, if you find that during your fast you're no longer getting hungry, if you find that you're not getting like the hanger or the headaches in between meals that you used to get, that is also a huge sign that your body has shifted to using fat as fuel, because you're no longer reliant on that blood sugar level, which can crash really easily between meals. Your body is switching over to burning fat as fuel. So if you find that you're feeling not super hungry in between meals, if you aren't getting that blood sugar crash feeling, then that's also a big sign that you're probably more metabolically flexible. All right, guys. So next week, we're going to be in week 2 of the 6-week summer intermittent fasting challenge. We're going to be doing a live stream every week of the challenge with new topics just like this. So if you guys want to join in, it'll be Monday next week at 9 a.m. PST as well. I also obviously post these after, so you can always watch the replay, but if you want to make sure that you can answer or have me answer some questions in the chat, then make sure you tune in live. It's always Monday at 9 a.m. PST. So you can join in then, and I'll try and get to as many questions as possible. But otherwise, if you guys want to join the 6-week summer intermittent fasting challenge, again, the link is down in the description below. It's one of my favorite challenges. It's one of the most fun. We have the new meal plan, new recipes, the AN community with the private Facebook group that's so supportive. So whether this is your first challenge or like your 15th, which we've done a lot of challenges, I think this is actually like the 20-something challenge that we've done with the community. But regardless of where you're at in your journey, there's going to be someone who's at roughly that same point as you as well within the private Facebook group too. So it's just a great supportive community to be part of, regardless of where you're at in your intermittent fasting or wellness journey. So if you guys want to join in, check out the link down in the description below. Otherwise, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. This was a really fun live stream, and I'll see you guys next week.